Hello everyone, I'm back again, and this time I just wanted to go over the Xbox Series X and the PS5 backwards compatibility, and how I feel that PS5's backwards compatibility is largely glossed over. But in order to do that, I have to do a direct comparison. So let's start with the Series X. The Series X has 3 generations of games that you can play backwards compatible on, but keep this in mind, guys. 360 and original Xbox titles have been carefully selected by Microsoft last generation during the Xbox One's life cycle. And they've been carefully selected and optimized. So, in actuality, you're getting maybe a third of the 360's library and maybe less than a third of the original Xbox. So to say 3 generations is, and again, this is just a nitpick of mine, but I feel like it's a little bit inaccurate. Yes, in one way you do get 3 generations of games, but in another way you don't get the full library of those games on either. So, again, minor nitpick, moving on. Now, backwards compatible titles can be played from an external drive. However, if you do that, you will lose the capabilities of the velocity architecture that Microsoft boasts about. So in order to take full advantage of the velocity architecture, you need to install your backwards compatible titles directly onto the internal SSD drive of the Series XS. So that's fine. However, one thing I do want to point out is one possible workaround for this is you can either buy their proprietary SSD expansion Seagate card, or you can buy a SSD external hard drive to plug into it. That's one way around it. But again, you have to manage your space very carefully, and you need to consider what to buy. So external SSDs aren't cheap. I mean, they're getting cheaper, but they're still not that cheap. And Microsoft's proprietary card definitely isn't cheap at a whopping $300. So it's almost as if you have to choose between fidelity and or just regular. Now you can set the refresh rate in the Series XS to 120 Hertz, or also known as 120 frames per second. You can also set it to 60 frames per second or 60 Hertz. But here's the thing. You cannot force a game that was never optimized for that refresh rate to play with that refresh rate. So your screen might be refreshing at 120 frames per second, but the game itself is not playing in 120 frames per second. It's playing in the best possible fidelity, though, in which case, let's take, I don't know, Halo or something. No, Halo's a bad example. Let's take Fable. Not really optimized for anything, so it'll run in 30 frames per second. Okay. It's still running in 30 frames per second, albeit it'll look smoother based on your Xbox's architecture and, internal settings. So that's not a bad thing. And I'm not knocking it before anybody says I am. Backwards compatibility on the Xbox Series X and S is great. But Sony took a very different approach. And I feel like it's largely glossed over in regards to legacy titles. So, because Sony doesn't have backwards compatibility with PS1, PS2, or PS3, that's what a lot of the reviewers focus on. However, what they don't focus on is the legacy mode that the PS5 has built into it automatically. And what it does is it allows you to play PS4 games from a regular external hard drive at full fidelity using the system's SSD and everything else. Like, it's not booting off the SSD, but it might as well be. It's wicked fast, and you honestly don't even think you're playing a PS4 game. Also, Sony has performance mode or graphics mode. I don't think that's what it's called, but you know what I mean. And when you turn on performance mode, a game that was never optimized for the PlayStation 5, you can run smooth as butter. And so let's say, for example, your game is very graphically intensive. but the frame rate is a little chuggy. Turn on performance mode, problem solved. And again, you can run all of your PS4 titles from your external drive in this way, which is just crazy. You don't need an external SSD drive to make these work with the architecture of the PS5. And this is largely overlooked by every reviewer on YouTube. Nobody ever talks about how great this is. Maybe it's because they never owned a big PS4 library in the first place. I'm not sure why. But I wanted to point it out because it was bugging me. Like, it's a large feature that nobody seems to be talking about, and if you do get a PS5, you'll appreciate wholeheartedly. Now, that being said, there are some issues. So, external drives with the PS5, everyone's had a different experience with them. For me, I've had one issue twice. When my apartment was completely powered down and lost power during a couple of storms. At first, the PS5, when it rebooted, didn't detect the external drive. How I got around this? I had to unplug the external drive and then plug it back in again. Doing so engaged the system to see that the drive wasn't turned off properly. It activated repair mode and away you go. But sometimes it's not so simple. Sometimes it doesn't see it at all regardless. So what you need to do is, instead of plugging it into the back of the console, leave the USB cord for the external hard drive plugged into the console itself, but unplug that USB cord from the back of your external drive, and then plug it back in again. Between those two steps, rinse and repeat, and you should fix the issue. Because your games are not gone. They were never erased. They're still on the hard drive. It's just that the system might need a minute or two to detect them there. I don't know why. It's a system hiccup. It's possibly fixed by now with all of Sony's updates, but it should be pointed out nonetheless. So yeah, backwards compatibility is largely overlooked on the PS5, and, you know, it's amazing on the Xbox Series X, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not. But I am saying that when people do their comparisons of these consoles, and one of the first things they say is, well, you know, backwards compatibility is way better on the Series X. I guess it depends on what type of gamer you are. Are you a PlayStation gamer? Or are you an Xbox one? Or are you both and you don't have a preference for either or? Whatever you have more games for is the console you're going to gravitate towards, because transitioning will be easier, right? But another thing is, games in the PS4's lifecycle and Xbox One are going on sale now, so you can get them dirt cheap. And so you can amass a massive library for either or and play backwards compatible titles. But here's the question. Would you prefer having to go out and buy more gadgetry, or, you know, have to manage your storage space constantly? Or would you prefer just to plug in an external drive and run everything at full fidelity? I'll leave the choice up to you guys. So, if you think that other people need to know about this, then, you know, I'd appreciate it if you share this video with them. Because, you know, again, PS5 it's a powerhouse. And unfortunately, again, just because of 3 generations of backwards compatibility, I think that backwards compatibility on the PS5 is largely overlooked. But anyways, I'm ranting now. If you like this video, smash that like button. If you didn't, smash the dislike button. And if you think I'm a big nerd, a sub to the channel would be awesome. Spread the love during this pandemic. And if you haven't already, maybe I'll see you in the next one. I'll see you guys around. That's the Jerry Rig Everything thing. Okay, I better not do that. That's copyrighted. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.